The star system of Aelora was calm. Its twin suns burned softly in the distance, sending golden light across the scattered colonies and stations that circled its habitable world. For decades, the people of Aelora lived in peace. They traded, they mined, and they farmed the rich plains of their green planet. War was not part of their lives. In fact, most of them had never seen a real warship. That peace ended the moment the Terran fleet arrived. The first detection came from an orbital station. An operator named Valen was monitoring the long-range sensors when the alarm screamed across the control room. 10, then 20, then 50 ships appeared in the void, sliding out of faster-than-light travel. Their silhouettes were unlike anything the Aelorians had ever seen before, angular, brutal, and heavy with armor. Each vessel seemed designed for survival in the harshest storms of the galaxy. The station went silent. Everyone recognized the signatures. The fleet belonged to the humans, the Deathworlders. Valen's hands shook. His training told him to send a system-wide alert, but for a few long seconds he hesitated. The stories about humans filled his mind. Every child in Aelora grew up hearing them. The Deathworlders came from a planet where storms tore apart continents, where beasts with teeth like blades hunted in packs, where even plants were poisonous. Their home was a nightmare world where only the strongest could survive. And somehow not only had humans survived, they had built machines, cities, and ships that carried them to the stars. To the peaceful species of the galaxy, that made humans both fascinating and terrifying. They were not like others. They were forged in constant danger. They were predators among diplomats. When Valen finally activated the system-wide alert, the colony leaders reacted as expected. Panic. Within hours, emergency meetings were held. The Council of Aelora gathered in their crystal halls on the surface of the planet. Representatives from every colony and station joined the session by hologram. The chamber buzzed with frightened voices. Words like invasion and blockade filled the air. The Deathworlders had not announced their purpose. They had simply arrived, dozens of warships hanging above the system like silent shadows. "They cannot be trusted," hissed Counselor Thaleen, her scaled hands trembling as she spoke. "We all know what they are. Their nature is violence. If they are here, it can only mean conquest." Others agreed. To them, the arrival of humans was nothing short of disaster. Aelora was rich in resources, gas, metals, fertile soil. It would tempt any empire, and who else but Deathworlders would take it by force? But one voice rose against the tide of fear. Elder Sarenth, the oldest member of the council, leaned forward on his staff and spoke slowly. "We must not assume. Stories are shadows. We have never spoken to humans directly. For all we know, they come in peace." The chamber erupted with laughter and disbelief. Peace from Deathworlders? No one wanted to believe it. Above the planet, the human fleet hung in careful silence. The flagship Resolute led the formation. On its command deck, Admiral Kalen observed the system's layout. His sharp eyes studied the colonies, the stations, and the glittering planet below. Around him, officers worked swiftly, running scans and checking supplies. Their mission was simple: resupply, refuel, and move on to the next sector. Yet Kalen knew what their presence must look like to the locals. "Any transmissions?" he asked. "None, sir," replied his communication officer. "They've gone quiet. No greetings, no warnings. But they're watching us." "Every station has powered up its defenses," Kalen sighed. He had expected this. Wherever humanity went, fear followed. The name Deathworlders had spread too far, too fast. It carried with it a weight heavier than any weapon. Even when humans came with open hands, others saw claws. "Let's wait," Kalen decided. "No sudden moves. Give them time." The fleet obeyed. Ships remained in high orbit, running only basic systems. No weapons charged, no troops deployed. But to the eyes of the Aelorians below, the Deathworlder fleet still looked like an armada of doom. Days passed. Fear spread among the people of Aelora. Families prepared emergency shelters. Some even demanded evacuation ships to flee the planet before war began. Children whispered questions their parents could not answer. Why are the Deathworlders here? Will they destroy us? In the council chambers, debates grew more heated. A group of younger leaders suggested striking first, using the system's defense platforms to at least cripple a few human ships before they could land troops. But the older members knew such an act would only bring destruction. The humans, after all, had survived countless dangers. Their fleet was built to withstand storms and predators far deadlier than any plasma cannon. Yet while the council argued, Something else stirred at the edge of the system. Something none of them noticed at first. On the fourth day, one of the human scout ships detected strange movements near the Orcs nebula, a swirling cloud of dust and plasma beyond the system's rim. At first it looked like natural radiation. But then the shapes emerged. Hundreds of dark objects moving in unison, their paths aimed directly at Alora. The humans scanned deeper. What they found chilled even Admiral Kalen. The objects were not ships in the usual sense. They were living machines, vast swarms of biomechanical entities. They consumed energy, drained atmospheres, and left behind lifeless rocks. Their path showed a trail of dead systems across the galaxy. In human databases, there was only one name for such a threat: the Devourers. Kalen called an emergency council aboard the Resolute. His officers gathered, their faces grim. "They're coming," Kalen said, displaying the sensor readings. "A swarm large enough to strip this system bare. They've done it before to other civilizations." "Alora's next," the officers exchanged uneasy glances. Some suggested leaving. After all, this wasn't Earth, and the Alorians were not their allies. Why risk their lives for strangers who already feared them? But Kalen's decision was firm. "We can't turn away. Look at them, these colonies have no fleets, no armies. If we leave, they die. Humanity may be feared, but we know survival better than anyone. If anyone can stop this swarm, it's us." His words carried the weight of his homeworld's legacy. On Earth, survival was not a choice, it was a way of life. Now that same spirit would be tested among the stars. Meanwhile, the Alorian Council still debated the humans' presence. Messages from stations reported no hostile actions, yet fear continued to rise. Then, on the seventh day, the humans broke their silence. A transmission from Admiral Kalen reached the council chambers. His voice was steady, deep, and serious. "People of Alora," he said, "we did not come here to conquer. We came here to rest. But a threat is coming to your system. A swarm of devourers approaches. If you do nothing, your worlds will fall. We will stand and fight. You must decide whether you will stand with us or flee." The chamber fell into silence. For the first time, the humans had spoken directly, and their words were not of conquest but of warning. Fear still lingered, but so did doubt. Were the Deathworlders truly here as invaders, or were they, against all odds, the only chance Alora had to survive? The council gave no answer that day. But across the system, ordinary citizens began to whisper something new. Not just fear, but a fragile thread of hope. The news spread across Alora like a storm. The humans had spoken, and their message was terrifying. A swarm of devourers was approaching. For many Alorians, it was the first time they had even heard that name. But to the scholars and historians, it was a word buried deep in the records of forgotten wars. The devourers were not conquerors. They were not diplomats. They were not even a civilization in the way others understood. They were hunger given form, vast, endless, and merciless. Wherever they passed, stars dimmed, planets withered, and civilizations vanished. To them, life was fuel. To them, Alora was simply another meal. In the council chamber, the leaders sat in silence after Admiral Kalen's transmission ended. The golden crystal walls of the hall glowed faintly as if holding its breath. No one wanted to speak first. The fear was too heavy. At last, Counselor Thaleen rose. "This is a trick," she declared, her voice sharp. "The Deathworlders invent stories to frighten us. They will say anything to stay in our system longer, and once our defenses are down, they will take everything." Many nodded in agreement. Fear of humans was stronger than belief in unseen monsters. But Elder Seranth leaned forward on his staff. His ancient eyes shimmered. "I have studied the old archives," he said softly. "The humans speak the truth. The Devourers are real. Our ancestors fled from them generations ago. That is why our people settled here, far from the great trade routes. We thought the swarm would never come again." The council chamber erupted in voices. Fear, anger, and disbelief all mixing together. Some wanted to prepare evacuation ships immediately. Others demanded stronger defenses. But almost all agreed on one thing: they could not trust humans completely. Far above, on the human flagship Resolute, Admiral Kalen studied the enemy through sensor projections. The Devourer swarm was still days away, but it grew larger with each hour. Hundreds of biomechanical vessels drifted in eerie silence, their movements like a school of predators in dark water. "They are not organized like us," said Commander Lyra, the ship's tactical officer. No command structure, no flagships. They move as one living wave. Kalen nodded grimly. That makes them harder to stop. You cut off the head of an army, and the body falls. But this is a tide. You don't stop a tide with blades. You survive it, or you drown. The humans had fought dangerous foes before. They had survived hostile worlds, rival empires, and even wars among themselves. But the Devourers were something older, stranger. Even humanity's battle-hardened officers felt a chill watching their endless advance. "Will the Elorians fight beside us?" asked one of the younger officers. Kalen shook his head. "Not yet. They fear us more than they fear the swarm. That will change. But only if we hold the line long enough for them to see the truth." On the surface of Aelora, fear turned into chaos. Citizens gathered in crowded squares demanding answers from their leaders. Markets closed, farms were abandoned, and transport lines filled with ships preparing to flee. In a quiet home on the edge of the capital, a young teacher named Nira tried to calm her students. She looked into their wide, frightened eyes and told them stories from ancient legends, of heroes who stood against impossible odds, of unity between species in times of darkness. But even as she spoke, she wondered if this would be the end of her world. Her younger brother, who worked at the spaceport, returned that evening with news. "The humans are preparing their ships for battle," he whispered. "I saw them. Their engineers walk through fire as if it is nothing. They laugh while working with weapons that could destroy cities. Sister, maybe they are not here to hurt us. Maybe they are here to save us." Nira said nothing, but a spark of hope lit within her heart. 3 days later, the Devourers entered the system. The first to see them were the human scouts stationed near the outer gas giants. Their transmissions carried images of the swarm, thousands of shadowy forms blotting out starlight as they moved like a great living storm. The Elorian stations picked up the same signals soon after. The council gathered once more, but this time there was no laughter or disbelief. The threat was visible now, undeniable. The swarm was real. "They are too many," whispered Counselor Thaleen, her voice trembling. "Even if we trusted the Deathworlders, even if we joined with them, how could we hope to stop this?" Elder Sarenth answered with a heavy sigh. "Perhaps we cannot. But if we do nothing, we perish without a fight. If the Deathworlders are willing to stand, perhaps we must too." Admiral Kalen's fleet moved into defensive formation near the colonies. Human ships formed a steel wall, angular giants bristling with weapons. They did not hide. They did not run. Their very posture declared defiance. From orbit, the Elorians watched with mixed feelings. To them, the human fleet was terrifying. Yet now, as the Devourers closed in, it also looked like a shield. For the first time, some began to see humans not as predators but as guardians. On the bridge of the Resolute, Kalen gave his orders. "Target priority, the largest swarm clusters. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we buy time. No matter what, the civilians must survive." His officers saluted. To them, this was nothing new. Humanity had always fought against odds. They carried in their blood the legacy of Deathworld survival. If this battle was impossible, then it was just another challenge to overcome. The Devourers struck at last. They came like a tide of living metal, their ships screeching with unearthly signals. Beams of energy slashed across the void, tearing through space. The first wave hit the human front line. Human ships roared back in fury. Railguns spat slugs the size of boulders, punching holes through the swarm. Plasma cannons lit the void in burning arcs. Torpedoes streaked forward, detonating in bursts of fire that scattered dozens of Devourers at once. But the swarm was endless. For every one destroyed, 10 more appeared. They swarmed over damaged human ships like locusts, tearing at armor, latching on with tendrils of energy-draining machinery. On the surface, Elorians watched the battle through broadcast screens. They saw the humans fight with reckless courage. They saw them ram their crippled ships into clusters of Devourers, detonating reactors to destroy as many as possible. They saw them dive into impossible maneuvers, fighting at close range where no sane pilot would dare fly. The Elorians gasped. This was not the cold, calculated war of their history. This was survival in its purest form. Desperate, fearless, unyielding. And in that moment, many began to understand why humans were called Deathworlders. It was not just because they came from a harsh planet. It was because they carried within them the will to fight when all others would surrender. Hours passed. The first clash ended with heavy losses. Half a dozen human ships burned in orbit, their crews lost to the void. But against all odds, the Devourer advance slowed. For the first time in countless years, the swarm had been forced to retreat from its prey. In the council chambers, the leaders watched in silence. Even Councillor Thaleen, who had once spoken so harshly against humans, could not deny what she had seen. The Deathworlders had stood in the storm and held. Elder Saranth's voice broke the silence. They fight for us, though they owe us nothing. Perhaps it is time we asked ourselves what kind of people we are. Do we hide in fear? Or do we stand beside those who fight for life itself? No one answered. But across the system, whispers grew. For the first time, the people of Aelora began to see the Deathworlders not as monsters, but as saviors in the making. And as the swarm gathered for its next attack, a choice lay before the Aelorians: to remain paralyzed by fear, or to join the humans in the fire of survival. The system of Aelora braced itself for war. The first skirmish had shown the Devourer's strength and the humans' defiance. But it had also revealed something else. The swarm was not invincible. For the first time in generations, the Devourers had been slowed. On the surface, the people of Aelora watched the battle through endless broadcasts. They saw the Deathworlder fleet standing like a wall between the swarm and their colonies. They saw the losses humanity endured, yet also the courage they displayed. Still, fear lingered. The Devourers had not been destroyed. They were regrouping. And when they returned, the storm would be greater than before. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Kalen stood at the center of the command deck. Around him, holographic projections displayed the positions of ships and the swarm's formations. His officers waited in silence for his command. "The Devourers are testing us," Kalen said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "They have learned from the first strike. The next wave will be stronger, faster. We must be ready." Commander Lyra frowned at the display. "We can hold for some time, Admiral. But their numbers..." She hesitated. "If this continues, our fleet will be worn down. We cannot endure forever." Kalen nodded slowly. He knew she was right. Humanity's strength was not in numbers. It was in will and creativity, in the refusal to yield. Then we make them pay for every ship they send. Every time they come, they will bleed for it. Meanwhile, in the Council of Aelora, the debate continued. Holograms of the battle flickered across the chamber as frightened leaders argued. "We must evacuate," one shouted. "The humans may delay them, but in the end, the Devourers will consume us all." "And where will you go?" Elder Saranth countered. "The swarm will follow. There is nowhere to hide. These humans stand for us, and yet we sit here arguing." Councillor Thaleen, who had once spoken against the Deathworlders, remained quiet this time. Her sharp eyes were fixed on the images of human ships burning in orbit. She saw how the humans sacrificed without hesitation. It unsettled her, but it also stirred something unfamiliar: respect. Still, the council could not agree. Fear weighed too heavily. For now, the humans fought alone. The second wave of Devourers came with the force of a storm. Thousands of biomechanical vessels swept into the system, their dark shapes blotting out the starlight. They moved with eerie precision, like predators circling prey. "Contact in 5 minutes," reported a human officer on the Resolute. Kalen's voice cut across the deck. "All ships, defensive wall formation. Heavy units in the center, fast ships on the flanks. Railguns ready. Plasma batteries charged. We hold this line." The fleet moved as one. Giant battleships slid into position, smaller frigates darting between them like swift hunters. Together they formed a shield in orbit above Aelora. Then the swarm struck. The first impact shook the void. Waves of Devourers slammed against the human wall, lashing with beams of energy and ripping claws of metal. Explosions flashed across the dark. Human ships fired back with fury. Railguns thundered, spitting slugs that tore through Devourer hulls. Plasma fire lit the sky like storms of lightning. Torpedoes screamed forward, detonating in burning bursts that scattered the enemy. But the Devourers pressed harder. They swarmed over damaged ships, clinging to their hulls like parasites. Their tendrils pierced armor, draining power and life. "Frigate Hunter reports boarding," shouted an officer. Kalen's jaw tightened. "Tell them to fight to the last man." On the screens, the Frigate Hunter burned brightly. Surrounded and consumed, its crew made the final choice. They overloaded the reactor. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, taking dozens of Devourers with it. The Aelorians watching from the surface gasped in shock. To them, the act looked insane. No species they knew would destroy their own vessel so willingly. But to the humans, it was not madness, it was survival. Children cried out, asking why the humans would do such a thing. Parents struggled to answer because even they did not fully understand. All they could say was, "The Deathworlders never surrender." On the battlefield, Kalen gave new orders. "Shift formation. Left flank, push them toward the gas giant. Right flank, break their clusters apart." The humans obeyed without hesitation. Damaged ships rammed into enemy groups, detonating charges at close range. Fighters weaved between swarms, drawing fire away from the heavy vessels. Every move was reckless, dangerous, and effective. Commander Lyra turned to Kalen, eyes wide. "We're bleeding ships, Admiral. But it's working. The swarm is slowing." Kalen's voice was iron. "Good. Let them feel pain. Let them learn fear." In the council chamber, silence fell as the Aelorians watched the impossible unfold. The humans were not retreating. They were not surrendering. They were throwing themselves into the heart of the storm and holding it back. Elder Saranth leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Look at them. They do not fight for themselves alone. They fight for us, though we gave them no welcome. Can you not see? These Deathworlders carry a strength we cannot match." For the first time, even Thaleen did not argue. After hours of brutal combat, the swarm finally withdrew. Thousands of Devourer vessels lay shattered in the void. Dozens of human ships were gone too, reduced to burning debris, their crews lost. But Elora still stood. On the bridge of the Resolute, the survivors gathered around Kalen. Their faces were weary, their uniforms scorched, but their eyes still burned with determination. "We held," whispered Commander Lyra. Kalen nodded. "We held, but this was only the beginning. The swarm will return, stronger, angrier. We must be ready." News of the battle spread quickly through the colonies. At first, the people spoke of fear, the size of the swarm, the danger it brought. But soon their words turned to awe. They spoke of how the humans fought without hesitation. They spoke of ships that sacrificed themselves to save others. They spoke of courage unlike anything they had ever seen. In homes, in streets, in crowded stations, one phrase began to pass from mouth to mouth: "The Deathworlders fight for us." And slowly, fear of the humans began to change. It did not vanish, but it softened, reshaped into something new. Respect. That night, Elder Saranth stood before the council once more. "The humans cannot hold forever," he said. "They bleed for us while we sit in silence. If we do not stand beside them, then we do not deserve the life they protect." For the first time, the council listened without interruption. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. And though fear still gripped their hearts, another feeling had begun to grow. The realization that survival was only possible if they stood with the Deathworlders. Above, the human fleet prepared for the next wave. Ships were repaired. Crews mourned their dead but did not falter. The Devourers had been slowed but not stopped. The greatest battles were yet to come. Admiral Kalen looked out across the stars. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the deck. "They call us Deathworlders, let them. We are children of storms, forged in fire. And if the swarm wants this system, they will have to tear it from our hands." The crew answered with steady silence, their resolve unbroken. Far away in the dark beyond the stars, the Devourer swarm gathered once more. Their hunger had not ended. Their tide had not been turned. They were coming again, and when they came, the humans would be waiting. The aftermath of the second battle hung heavy over the system of Aelora. The void above the planet was littered with broken ships and drifting debris. Human wrecks still burned, their twisted hulls floating silently in the darkness. But scattered among them were the remains of countless Devourers. For the first time in living memory, the swarm had been forced to retreat. On the surface, the people of Aelora watched in silence. They had seen the Deathworlders stand in the storm. They had seen them throw their ships and lives into impossible battles. And most shocking of all, they had seen them win, even when hope seemed lost. Still, the Council of Aelora remained uncertain. In their crystal chamber, the leaders argued once more. "We cannot continue to rely on them," said Councillor Thaleen, though her voice lacked its usual fire. "The Devourers will return in even greater numbers. What can one fleet do against such a tide?" Elder Saranth leaned heavily on his staff. His voice was quiet, yet it carried through the chamber. "You saw them. You saw how they fight. They do not yield. They do not flee. They will fight until there is nothing left of them. Can we say the same for ourselves? Silence followed his words. For once, even Thaleen could not answer. High above on the flagship Resolute, Admiral Kalen reviewed the state of his fleet. The second clash had cost them dearly. 10 ships destroyed, dozens damaged beyond quick repair, hundreds of lives lost. Yet the spirit of his crew had not broken. If anything, it burned brighter. But Kalen knew the truth. Humanity could not hold the swarm alone. Not forever. He stood on the command deck watching the stars. Commander Lyra approached quietly. Repairs are underway, Admiral. But the next wave will come soon. We cannot endure another battle of that scale without help. Kalen's expression was hard. I know. But the Aelorians still fear us more than they fear the swarm. They will not fight beside us unless they see they have no other choice. And when that moment comes, Lyra asked. Kalen's voice was firm. Then we fight together, or we fall together. The choice came sooner than anyone expected. 2 days after the second battle, alarms screamed across the fleet. Scouts reported a new wave approaching. Larger, faster, more organized. The swarm had learned. Where before they scattered into chaotic clusters, now they moved with purpose, gathering into a single vast formation. The Council received the same reports. Panic spread like fire. Colonies begged for evacuation. Families filled transports, hoping to escape before the storm arrived. But Elder Saranth raised his voice in the chamber. Where will you run? He demanded. The Devourers do not stop. They do not rest. If you flee, they will follow. You will lead them to new homes, and there too they will feed. There is no escape, only survival. And survival demands unity. His words shook the chamber. For the first time, even Thaleen found herself nodding slowly. She remembered the images of human ships burning to save strangers. Could her people do less? The battle began with fury. The swarm descended on the human fleet like a storm of living fire. Thousands of biomechanical vessels filled the void, their dark bodies glowing with stolen energy. The humans met them head-on, just as before. Railguns thundered. Plasma arcs lit the stars. Ships rammed and detonated in desperate strikes, but this time the swarm pressed harder. They pierced through the human wall, driving deep toward the colonies. Civilians watched in horror as Devourer vessels streaked past the front lines, closing in on their world. On the Resolute, Kalen slammed his fist against the console. We're breaking. All units, close ranks. Hold them back. The human fleet obeyed, but the line was faltering. Too many enemies. Too much fire. And then something unexpected happened. A new signal lit up the battle map. A formation of Aelorian ships, civilian in design but hastily armed, broke from the planet and rushed into the fight. Leading them was a medical cruiser, glowing with bright lights of aid and rescue. The crew of the Resolute stared in shock. Commander Lyra whispered, "They're joining us." The Aelorian ships flew straight into danger, beaming out messages across every frequency. We will not run. We will not abandon the Deathworlders. We fight beside them. Kalen's eyes hardened with pride. All ships make room for our allies. We fight together. The sight spread hope across the system. Civilians watching from the surface cried out in relief as their ships joined the Deathworlders in the storm. Suddenly, humanity was no longer alone. The Aelorian medical ship darted between burning human vessels, pulling survivors from wrecks. Cargo haulers carried makeshift missile pods, launching crude but effective volleys into the swarm. Mining vessels, built for tearing rock, turned their drills and cutters against Devourer hulls. For the first time, Aelorians and humans fought side by side. On the battlefield, Kalen quickly adapted. His mind moved like a storm, turning chaos into order. Pair our battleships with their haulers, he ordered. Their armor is weak, but they can hit hard. And tell their medical ship, stay close to the center. We'll protect them. Together, the mixed fleet formed a new wall. Humans took the front, absorbing the worst of the storm. Aelorians provided cover fire, supplies, and rescue. It was not perfect, but it was enough to change the tide. In the council chamber, leaders watched the battle unfold. For the first time, their ships stood in the fire, and as they fought, a strange pride filled the room. Thaleen, once the loudest critic, turned to Saranth. You were right, old one. Unity is the only path. Alone we fall. Together we endure. Saranth smiled faintly. It is not too late to learn courage. The battle raged for hours. Again and again the swarm struck. Again and again the joint fleet pushed them back. The cost was heavy. Ships lost, lives sacrificed, but the line held. At last, Kalen gave a new order. Prepare the trap. The plan had been whispered among human officers since the first skirmish. If the swarm could be lured into the gas giant's gravity well, its dense atmosphere could be turned into a weapon. A single massive detonation could burn the swarm in one strike. But to succeed, the fleet had to draw the Devourers close, and that meant holding the line longer than ever before. Tell the Aelorians, Kalen said. This is our chance. If they fight with us now, they fight for survival itself. The message spread, and this time the Aelorians did not hesitate. Their fleet shifted position, matching human maneuvers. Their leaders sent out one final transmission to their people. Stand, fight, survive. As the swarm pressed into the trap, the fleet fought with everything they had. Humans hurled their ships into reckless dives. Aelorians launched desperate volleys. Medical crews worked without rest, pulling the wounded from burning wrecks. The void became a storm of fire and fury. At last, the swarm entered the gas giant's upper atmosphere. Human torpedoes ignited its gases. Aelorian haulers detonated their fuel reserves. The skies lit up in a blaze brighter than the suns themselves. The swarm screamed in signals that echoed across the void. Thousands of Devourer vessels burned, torn apart in the explosion. The survivors scattered, fleeing into the dark. The battle was over. Silence fell across the system. Ships drifted in the quiet aftermath, their hulls scarred and broken but still standing. Humans and Aelorians alike breathed in relief. On the Resolute, Admiral Kalen stood at the bridge, his face weary but resolute. Commander Lyra whispered, "We did it." Kalen shook his head. Not alone. Not this time. He looked at the allied ships around them. Together. In the council chamber, leaders bowed their heads. Elder Sarenth spoke softly. The Deathworlders are no longer strangers. They are our allies, our protectors, and our brothers in survival. Today we stood together. Tomorrow we build together. And across Aelora, the people whispered the same truth. The Deathworlders are not monsters. They are saviors. The unity had been forged in fire. And though the swarm was broken, everyone knew this was not the end. Greater storms waited beyond the stars. But now Aelora would not face them alone. They would face them with Deathworlders. The void above Aelora was calm for only a brief moment. The firestorm in the gas giant had destroyed most of the Devourer swarm, but it had not ended their hunger. The survivors regrouped in the darkness beyond the system, silent, patient, and relentless. Admiral Kalen knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. He walked across the bridge of the Resolute, his heavy boots echoing against metal floors. Around him, the crew prepared. Repairs had been made to the ships that could be saved. Ammunition was restocked. Every crew member had seen comrades fall, yet every eye still burned with determination. Commander Lyra approached quietly. "Admiral, the Aelorian fleets are ready. They've agreed to fight beside us, no hesitation this time." Kalen nodded. "Good, today we finish what we started. Today we protect every world in this system. Together." On the surface, the people of Aelora watched nervously. Their eyes turned toward the stars, toward the small flickers of human and Aelorian ships preparing for the final fight. Children clutched their parents' hands, and elders whispered prayers for the brave souls above. Even Thaleen, once the counselor most skeptical of humans, felt her heart rise with a strange pride. These were the beings she had feared, yet now they were her protectors. They were fighting for strangers without hesitation. Elder Sarenth stood beside her. "They are Deathworlders," he said softly. "Forged in storms, sharpened by danger. Today we see why fear has followed their name. But today, we also see why respect must follow it." The Devourers returned like a living shadow, vast and relentless. Thousands of vessels emerged from the darkness, their biomechanical forms glinting with stolen energy. The system trembled under their approach. The Allied fleet moved into formation. Humans took the front line, Aelorians the support wings. Smaller ships darted around the edges, intercepting incoming fire and rescuing wounded crews. The plan was precise. Humans would draw the swarm into a final trap, while Aelorians strengthened the flanks and ensured the plan succeeded. On the Resolute, Kalen gave orders with calm precision. "Line up target clusters. Fire when ready, but do not break formation. Hold them here. Make them bleed for every inch." The first clash began with thunder. Devourer beams slashed through space, tearing into ships and sending fiery debris drifting into the void. But the humans did not falter. Their vessels danced through the storm with deadly precision. A human cruiser rammed a cluster of Devourers, detonating its core and taking dozens with it. Smaller human fighters weaved in and out, drawing fire and giving heavier ships room to fire concentrated volleys. Every move was daring, every risk calculated. The Aelorian ships followed the humans' lead. Mining ships fired makeshift missiles. Medical ships moved dangerously close to the front to rescue wounded humans. For the first time, the two species truly fought as one. Hours passed. The swarm pressed harder, sensing the trap. Their endless hunger drove them to strike with terrifying force. Yet for every attack, the fleet responded. Devourer vessels were destroyed in flashes of fire. Explosions lit the void as ships sacrificed themselves to protect allies. In the Resolute's control room, Kalen watched the strategy unfold. "They are following the plan," he said quietly. "The trap is working. Once they are over the gas giant, we ignite." Commander Lyra nodded, her voice tight with tension. "We have to hold until then. Any break in the line and it fails." Kalen's gaze hardened. "We do not break. We do not yield. Not now, not ever." The Devourers finally entered the gravity well of the gas giant. Their swarm compressed under the planet's pull, their energy-charged bodies glowing brighter. This was the moment Kalen had been waiting for. "All units," he commanded. "Fire everything. Overload reactors. Ignite the gas giant. Make them pay for their hunger." The fleet responded in unison. Human torpedoes streaked through the void, detonating in the upper atmosphere. Aelorian haulers launched fuel pods, igniting massive explosions. The gas giant's clouds erupted in a storm of fire and plasma, consuming the Devourer swarm like a wildfire. The screams of the swarm echoed faintly through space, though to human and Aelorian ears, it sounded more like silence, a quiet end to countless years of terror. When the light faded, the devastation was immense. Thousands of Devourer vessels lay destroyed. The gas giant glowed with fire, a beacon of the battle's cost. Human ships had suffered heavy losses, and many Aelorian vessels had been destroyed as well, but the system had survived. The Allied fleet drifted in quiet relief. Crews checked on each other, counting the cost, honoring the bravery of those who had fallen. For the first time in generations, Alora was safe. On the surface, people cheered. Fires and sirens filled the cities, but their voices carried gratitude and awe. Children ran through the streets, pointing at the sky where human and Aelorian ships still floated, battered but alive. The Council of Aelora held a memorial the next day. Leaders, citizens, and survivors gathered to honor not only the dead, but the Deathworlders who had come to protect them. Elder Saranth spoke first. "Today we witnessed courage beyond understanding," he said. "These Deathworlders came from a planet that should have made them cruel, but instead they became our shield. They fought for strangers, for those they had never met. They became our saviors." Thaleen stepped forward, her scales reflecting the sun's light. "We feared them once. We whispered of monsters. But now we know the truth. They are not monsters. They are warriors, heroes, and friends." Across the city, people whispered the same. "The Deathworlders saved us." On board the Resolute, Admiral Kalen walked through the crew, offering words of quiet praise. They had lost much, but they had also proven the strength of humanity, not through conquest, but through courage, ingenuity, and a refusal to abandon those in need. Commander Lyra approached him. "They see us now," she said. "The Aelorians, they respect us. They fear less." Kalen nodded, looking out at the stars. "We were never meant to be feared forever. We were meant to endure, to protect, to remind the galaxy that survival is strength, but compassion is power." In the following weeks, the system slowly rebuilt. Human engineers worked alongside Aelorian crews to repair stations, fortify defenses, and clear debris. Trade routes reopened. Children returned to schools. But above all, respect for humanity had changed. The name Deathworlder was no longer whispered in fear. It was spoken in awe. The humans did not stay long. Their mission complete, the fleet prepared to depart. But before leaving, Kalen sent one final message to the Aelorian Council. "We will return if the galaxy calls," he said. "But for now, this system is yours. Stand together. Protect each other. Remember what it means to fight for life itself." The Council responded with gratitude, their words heavy with emotion. "You will always have friends here. You have saved more than our worlds. You have saved our hope." As the Terran fleet jumped into faster-than-light travel, the people of Alora looked to the stars. The skies were empty once more, yet the memory of courage remained. Elder Sarant spoke softly to Thaleen beside him. They came from a world that should have broken them. Instead, they became the guardians of others. Perhaps this is the lesson the galaxy has needed for a long time. Thaleen nodded, her eyes still shining with awe. They are more than we imagined. They are heroes. And far away, traveling between stars, the Deathworlders continued their journey. They carried with them the legacy of Earth, the spirit of survival, and the promise that no matter how dark the universe grew, humanity would always stand undaunted, unyielding, and ready to protect life wherever it could. In that moment, the galaxy knew a new truth. Humans were not just survivors of a harsh world. They were the saviors of the systems they touched. And the story of the day the Deathworlder fleet became alien saviors would be told across worlds for generations.